Good morning, everyone. It is October 9th, and before I get started talking about what's going on in Israel, I just want to thank you all for getting me to 100,000 followers. It means a lot to me, and I appreciate every single one of you. And no, I have not forgotten about Ukraine. I will likely push a Ukraine update soon, but this video has to deal with Israel, obviously. So the Israeli death toll for the recent attacks by Hamas has risen to 800, with over 2,400 Israelis being injured. The Israeli Defense Forces have announced this morning they have recaptured all settlements and facilities near the border with Gaza, ejecting Hamas from the area. The U.S. State Department has reportedly now confirmed that at least 9 Americans were killed and possibly dozens are still missing or taken as hostages by Hamas. Hamas is using these hostages as defensive chess pieces to defend critical infrastructure and are now claiming that an Israeli airstrike last night on Gaza Strip resulted in the death of 4 Israeli hostages as well as their captors who are a part of the Al-Qassam brigades. Israeli defense forces and tanks have been engaged with militants attempting to cross the border into northern Israel from Lebanon. Exchanges of rockets and airstrikes continue both in southern Israel near Gaza as well as in northern Israel near the Lebanese border. Israeli attack helicopters and fighter jets actually entered southern Lebanon to conduct strikes on Hezbollah border observation sites and towers. A number of buildings in the Lebanese town of Dahahira have been destroyed by these strikes. It has been reported that Israeli artillery is now online and has been shelling several militant forward operation sites in southern Lebanon, including the towns of Yarin, Marwahin, and Aita al-Shab. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad claimed responsibility for the clashes with the Israeli defense forces that have been taking place along the border with Lebanon. Now, just a reminder, this wasn't Hezbollah necessarily, and there are several groups that operate in Lebanon, including Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and other Palestinian armed groups. Hostile actions at the border with Lebanon doesn't necessarily mean they're fighting Hezbollah, but it is highly likely that Hezbollah is aware and maybe supporting the operations. The Israeli Defense Force has announced earlier that their Air Force carried out 130 strikes across Gaza Strip in a 3-hour window. In response, Jerusalem was attacked by Hamas with a large number of rockets. Israeli Air Force is currently targeting telecommunications networks as well as mission command hubs around Gaza. The Israeli military is sending a large number of reinforcements to Gaza in preparation for a ground invasion, as well as blocking efforts potentially on the Lebanese border. In order to minimize civilian casualties while targeting Hamas infrastructure and rocket point of origin sites, the Israeli Defense Force has been releasing statements, sending text messages, and notifying residents of various neighborhoods of Gaza, telling them to immediately evacuate into bomb shelters or quickly move out of the area ahead of strikes. Now, a spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Force stated earlier this morning that the military and political leadership of Hamas, as well as any of their assets, are considered attackable and doomed. They further stated that the commander of the recent attacks, the Hamas commander, is a dead man. The Israeli Defense Force has announced that the number of military reservists who have now been called up for active duty has increased from 150,000 to well over 300,000. And just from the observation of what's going on, this is not an ejection force getting militants out of Israeli territory, but rather a Gaza occupation force with a defensive blocking force along the Lebanese border. This is total war in the region, with the possibility of focusing on moving further to engage Hezbollah if need be up in the north. The Egyptian Minister of Intelligence is claiming to have called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu before the surprise attack and told him something unusual and terrible will happen from Gaza. Netanyahu reportedly has said he was never contacted by the Egyptian government with regards to the attack, and it never happened. Obviously, this is something he would say, because if he admitted he received intelligence about an upcoming attack and did nothing to prevent it, that would look very, very badly on the Prime Minister. Now, the Qatari Foreign Ministry, in coordination with U.S. State Department, has reportedly holding urgent negotiations with Hamas in order to get them to release their hostages before the beginning of an upcoming Israeli ground invasion into the Gaza Strip. The European Union announced that roughly $700 million in aid for Palestinian authorities and groups in Israel has been suspended until further notice. The Israeli Minister of Energy and Infrastructure announced that he has ordered the immediate halt of water to Gaza Strip, and the Israeli Minister of Defense has ordered a total siege of Gaza Strip, allowing no food, no fuel, no electricity, along with anything else to enter the Gaza Strip at all. He went on to say, quote, "We are fighting with human animals and we will act accordingly," end quote. The Prime Minister of Israel reportedly talked to President Biden again, and during a phone call said that Israel will launch an invasion of Gaza Strip because they have no choice, and that Hamas has now forced them to make the decision for a long and difficult war. The messaging on this war from the Biden administration has been somewhat disjointed, as the president has said he absolutely supports Israel's right to defend itself, while Secretary of State Antony Blinken has called for a ceasefire. He did so in a tweet that he has since deleted. The fact of the matter is we can't simultaneously support Israel knowing they are going to conduct a full retaliatory ground invasion, but also support an immediate ceasefire. With Antony Blinken deleting that tweet, it's likely he's becoming more in line with President Biden's stated provisions for defense of Israel rather than a ceasefire. Hamas supporters gathered at Times Square in New York City yesterday to celebrate the attack on Israel, some of whom were showing images of the Holocaust and swastikas in an apparent affront to Jewish Israelis. Acting Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland and Acting Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Sasha Baker told senators to prepare their constituents for a long war in Israel and the Gaza Strip, indicating that U.S. support, both tangible support and political support, will be necessary in the coming weeks. They also suggested an imminent funding package isn't necessary, but they said new security assistance for Israel should be included in Ukrainian-focused security assistance supplemental packages. Specifically, officials added Israel will likely need precision-guided missiles as well as replenishments for their Iron Dome missile defense system. On the call, Senate Armed Services Committee Chair Reid brought up Tommy Tuberville's hold on general officer appointees and wanted to know the impact of having less generals operational in the region. The fact of the matter is there are acting generals, but they are limited in their scope of what they can do because they have not been confirmed by Congress. Tommy Tuberville has held up those as a part of his position on the committee that considers these appointments, has been holding up these general officer appointments, and they're trying to find ways to break this logjam and using this potential national security situation with Israel as breaking that logjam is what we're looking at from the Biden administration, as well as those that want to get these generals to work. State Department vacancies were also brought up. Positions like the U.S. Ambassador to Egypt and the State Department Counterterrorism Coordinator. Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chair Cardin and Ranking Member Rich told senators they're making progress on getting these nominations for ambassadorships unstuck and are hoping to confirm them in the coming weeks. But the fact of the matter is not having an ambassador in Egypt when Egypt is providing intelligence to Israel, it puts the U.S. somewhat in a disadvantaged position when it comes to understanding what is going on in the region. So more to follow on that. I'm keeping an eye on it, and I will push something on Ukraine here later today. And I thank you all for bringing me to 100,000. Have a good rest of your holiday, everyone.